Hey, welcome back, everyone. I have Sierra Smith from Sun Peak Official again. And today we're going to be talking about kind of what generational wealth means or what it means to you. And because last week, after we got off camera, we were kind of talking about some things and some interesting topics came up. So I wanted to kind of dig deeper into this about kind of generational wealth and maybe what started her on the path for looking for financial freedom. So welcome back, Sierra.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, this should be a fun one. I think after our talk last week off camera, some interesting things came up, and I was kind of intrigued. So maybe you want to kind of touch on that a little bit.
Sure. So I think after we kind of wrapped up our talk on student loans, we talked about just kind of like where the pivot was as far as financial literacy goes in my life and when I wanted to, start picking up on chasing financial freedom and kind of talked a little bit about my history as far as um, my family was not well off and there was no generational wealth to pass on. We did talk about like the different scholarship programs that were available to like my siblings versus what I had available to me, because both of my parents worked in education, and my dad was a teacher and my mom was a paraprofessional and did that for their entire careers. Um, and then it did not exactly set us up financially to have any sort of abundance passed on to us. And so all of us were very driven and very much knew the value of education, and I definitely think that is a form of wealth that they passed on to us. But as far as, like I said, abundance or assets or financial gains, there we all kind of started from scratch whenever we began our college pursuits. So yeah, that's kind of like um my my history, I would say. And then it wasn't really um until I think I was evaluating whether or not I was going to go ahead and get my PhD in psychology that I really was like, okay, is this financial investment worth it? And is it going to pay me back for the amount of debt I'm taking on? And is that career going to be lucrative enough? And is that going to set me up well in the future? So that's kind of where I started to reconsider the traditional path of go get a high, education and try to make the most from your W-2 job that you can.
So what does like generational wealth mean to you, though? I mean, like, how was your parents, your grandparents? Did they like set up your parents with like any like wealth or anything to transfer over to them, or what does generational wealth mean to you?
Um, I would say it means having some sort of abundance to pass on um, to the next generation. My grandparents did not have anything to pass on to my either side of my parents. But I both sides of my grandparents did run their own businesses. So they were a little more on the entrepreneurial side. And then so I think that although my parents didn't do any entrepreneurial endeavors as far as I can remember. So yeah, I think even the idea of having something to pass on, it was kind of like something I was aware of that other families did, and I kind of just chalked it up to like, well, they're the lucky ones, or they must have I was in that mindset of like they must have had their break or their ship came in kind of thing, and they got lucky and they had this hand me down from their family versus each generation having to kind of scrap their way just to kind of get to a lifestyle that was not scarce or something like that. So yeah, I guess in my mind I was just like generational wealth is actually having something to pass on, whether that's just one thing or it could just be $1,000 and that would be something. But yeah, that's how I would talk about it, I guess, in my mindset.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is kind of just, for like my parents, it's there are a lot of people in Hawaii. It's almost like you kind of lucked into it, I guess, in a way. I mean, like my parents, just bought a home or their parents bought a home, and it wasn't like they were planning for generational wealth. They were, investing in other things a lot of times. It was just Hawaii's housing market appreciated so well that, this primary residence that they bought, became this huge asset now from a value standpoint, and that was what they were able to pass down. So it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
like there was this mindset like we're trying to build this, generational wealth to pass on to generations. It was kind of lucked into a little bit where, they had to live somewhere. They bought a home, and then it appreciated, and maybe depending on how many siblings they had, that wealth was kind of distributed. So I think that plays a big factor into it also. But as far
I
as like,
can't I can't say that it feels super common to like happen into generational wealth like that, like without any sort of like real strategy.
well, I like I said, I think in Hawaii it was kind
Yeah.
of just because the prices, of housing went up so much. Where maybe other places in the mainland in the United States, housing values didn't appreciate as much. So
Mm-hmm.
even though you bought a home, the wealth transfer wasn't as great as, say, like I said, somewhere in Hawaii where you bought a home to live in and now it's worth, 1.5 million
Mm-hmm.
when they passed away. So there wasn't a lot of planning, I think. So for me, when that kind of light switch turned on, it was just eye opening to me how, there were so many opportunities that probably presented itself. Like I always talk, my grandfather was in he was a he had his own business. He was a contractor. He was in construction, so he built homes. And unfortunately, I mean, he did have his own home, but he didn't keep a lot of the properties that he built. He didn't have that vision, right? And I look at that
Yeah.
and it's kind of eye opening to me where there were so many opportunities. And even myself, I made tons of mistakes along the way. And if I just did a little bit things differently, my future would be set a lot more for my future generations. But what is your, I guess, kind of, when was that moment for you that you kind of saw like, I can provide a better future for my kids and whatnot?
I really had to break out of that mindset of um that people were getting lucky, getting into it. And I really had to um, take ownership of what I was creating for myself and for, my kid, and just for the future in general. And that that has been a difficult journey to go from kind of the way that I was raised with this other people get lucky kind of, I don't know, that was really ingrained into me. And um I mean, even in college, I remember thinking like, oh, people in sororities and fraternities, like there would be no way that I could fund, joining a club, a social club or something like that, and just kind of almost being bitter towards people who were more affluent. And I just really did had to do a lot of work. And I don't know, I can't really pinpoint, I guess, a moment. But I think once we did sell our second home, like our second primary residence, like we had been in one, sold, been in another, sold, and we actually had like our first like huge lump sum of money. And I was like, oh, I'm like one of these people now, and I have to figure out like what to do with this money, and which obviously we put in the work to get to the point where we got that. But it was suddenly like that's when I guess the switch flipped, as far as I need to figure out what to do with this money and how do I steward it well. And now I need some sort of like financial education, because I actually have money to do something with, and rather than very small amounts. And so I think that's where I really started to focus on what is that going to look like as far as a plan for the future and a plan for the next generation, and what can I do to make sure that my kid isn't growing up with this mindset of like, oh, I don't have anything, and I'm just gonna get what's given to me, and there's not much I can do about it. And I remember um my oldest brother, he in college, he had read a book, and I wish I could remember the book now, but it had a stat in there that said, only so many people a very small percentage of people actually break out of the class that they are born into. So if you're born into the middle class, like a very small amount of people actually move from the middle class to the upper class. And he like that was kind of his I would say driving factor to become an attorney and to get this like really high paying or more lucrative career was to prove that he could actually move classes. And so I remember like kind of having that in my mind, like he did take ownership of it in that way. And so I guess at some point I was just kind of working that out for myself.
So, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but where does that come from? Where, like, I see a lot of people say, like, my parents didn't give me anything, so I don't really want to leave anything for my children. Like, I want them to learn hard work and, start from the bottom and work their way up. So it's kind of, I see a lot of people like that's kind of the what's holding them back maybe, or why they don't want to pursue this thing to leave generational wealth for their kids. So for
Mm-hmm.
you, how did that change? As far as like you're saying, your parents maybe didn't provide a great starting point for you financially. Like, where did that shift come from?
Well, I mean, I understand what people are saying, and the stats are there to support it as far as, I think it's like 90% of families by the third generation lose the wealth that's been, passed on. And most people who give an inheritance to their kids squander it. And I think that I look at those stats and when I see them, and maybe this is part of my psychology training and statistics, but I look at those stats and I think, well, I want to know what the 10% did it right, and I want to know the 5% of kids who didn't squander the money, like tell me what their parents were doing, and I really have focused, I think, more so on how to do it correctly. And um because I know, I mean, I just don't have a desire, I guess, to accumulate wealth just to live like lavishly. Like it definitely feels like it needs to be purposeful. And so I want to focus on who's passing on the generational wealth and doing it well, and whose kids are stewarding it well and able to, make it really worthwhile um and make it meaningful. And so I think I kind of focus on that. And we really have adopted this like family team mindset around including my son in everything that we do work wise. So he comes to the rental properties with us. He, swept the floors and mopped them before or in between every showing. And he is around for all of the business pursuits that we're doing. And so it really including him in on that and hoping that that is going to demonstrate um to him like the actions that are associated with the accumulation of any sort of wealth or abundance, and what it takes, and that it won't be this foreign concept of like, oh, I have this lump sum, what do I do, which is kind of where I think landed on it, is like, okay, well, now I have money and I've my family's never had money, and so therefore I've never seen anyone figure out how to handle it and what to do with it and what the if what to use it for. So I would say that's kind of where the shift is like I got it, I guess, earlier in life than my family had the opportunity, or my parents or their parents had the opportunity. And so I got presented with this choice of what am I going to do.
Does your son enjoy going on these little trips with you, I guess, to the rental properties?
um
Not yet. Yeah.
Yeah, not so much. If there's an attic that he can get in, like where he gets to like climb up the ladder, or if there it like he loves getting into like the crawl spaces and get like following my husband under there to uh get to like the plumbing or electrical. Like he likes holding the flashlight and stuff like that. So if it's kind of like interesting like that, like the attics or the crawl spaces, but just going and having to like hang out while we, talk to other people is not as fun for him for sure, and he tries to fight that.
Oh yeah. So I'm managing, short-term rentals in Waikiki, and there's, a lot of times I gotta go drop something off. Like, oh, they ran out of this or they need this. So I
Uh-huh.
mean, it's a quick stop, but my son is just like, Waikiki again. Like he's like he's
Yeah.
just driving him nuts. He can't stand it. But I tell him, hey, it's gonna be worth it. And but yeah, but it's funny. Like you're saying, you're trying to get to see what you're doing, and and see the
Hmm.
hard work and benefits. The other thing I want to touch on was kind of as far as passing down generational wealth. Like for me, what kind of opened my eyes was just seeing like how kind of expensive things are today, and I feel like it's hard for the younger generation to get ahead. I mean, it is possible, and you have a lot of opportunities, but just things are so expensive, and I think that's kind of what wanted me to, like you're saying, I'm not trying to build this wealth where I'm going to live lavishly, and but it's to hopefully give my son a better opportunity or a better start,
Hmm.
to get ahead. And I think that, so even I'm a little bit older, I'm late 40s already, and initially when I first started this journey, I'm like, oh, I want to get all the 100 rental properties and this and that, and now it's like realizing like I don't need that much to provide something for him to have a better
Hmm.
start. So that's kind of where everything started for me too.
Yeah, and it's not even like, I mean, it's crazy because I think you're right. Like, it is so expensive. It doesn't even feel like you're giving them that much of a head start. It almost just feels like you're giving them, you're trying to give them at least kind of like the same equivalent that you had to get started, and it's just a higher barrier to entry right now. Not that it can't be done. I totally believe that anyone at any level could get into it. You just have to be a lot more creative, I think, now, with how expensive things are. But yeah.
Yeah, or even starting to where you don't have to take out debt. Like you don't need to take out student loans, or just providing that little push to where at least you can start and not have take out all these student
Yeah,
loans,
you
and
don't have
and
to be in the negative when you get
yeah.
started.
So I think that's what's super helpful, and why this path for generational wealth and financial freedom is super fun to be around other people and see their journeys and why they're doing it and why they started. But yeah, last week, like I said, after we got off camera, we were talking. I mean, you just had some funny stories talking about your upbringing and your path to financial freedom. So maybe we can touch on that one day if you're willing to bring up some of those stories. But yeah, I think what we're going to try and do too is we're going to compare maybe Tennessee and Hawaii in the next few weeks as far as prices, and see how inflation is affecting different areas and what the cost of things are.
Yeah, I think that'll be fun to see how I guess how much more you could have if you were here.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I don't know, did we touch on it on camera? You were talking about that what was it? No tax.
Oh yeah, tax-free groceries for the let's see, August, September, October, I believe, is all tax. Now you have to do the local tax, I think, but the state tax, there's no state tax on the groceries for the this 3 months, which is pretty awesome.
Yes. Do you notice like prices go up though? Like do the grocery stores like raise their prices
No,
or anything
I've
like that?
actually noticed grocery prices go down just a hair lately. Nothing super significant, but they are a little bit lower than they were, 6 months ago.
Interesting. Yeah, that's something we got to touch on too. Like, it's just so amazing that there's all these different programs in different states and everything, and how other. It's kind of, I don't want to get too political and stuff, but it's like kind of who you vote for, right? And that's the type of
Yeah.
policies they present and put out there. And I say that's interesting. There's a no tax, but you said it's not. I mean, it's groceries for so many months, right? And then
Hmm.
there's other months where it's other things.
Well, the weekend before was like clothing and computers, like technology stuff, for
Oh, you
that,
bought your
which I
Mac.
think a lot of states have that before school starts. They do a tax-free weekend where it's like clothes and tech stuff is tax-free, but the grocery thing is new to me. I've not experienced that.
Did you buy your Mac computer during that no tax
No,
time?
I that
Oh,
would have been smart. I didn't think about that, but I
uh,
bought it prior to.
yeah, you're just gonna
Um,
write it off now, right? You're gonna write it off for your business.
oh yeah, for sure. It's going right on that depreciation scale for my business. Yeah. And I think Tennessee has a lot of great programs going, or even their first time home buyer assistance is good. And I've just I mean, they have some incentives for sure. And there's a lot of properties around here that are eligible for like the USDA financing. So, yeah, as far as real estate goes, it's definitely a great state to invest in.
Cool. Well, before we wrap this up, I want to kind of finish off with, we were talking about generational wealth earlier, but so for you, what is like the end game look like? And like you mentioned, you're not trying to build this huge wealth to live lavishly and whatnot. So like kind of what does the end game look for you as far as your, I guess, maybe financial freedom or generational wealth that you may pass down?
I hope that we achieve financial freedom, before what would be a standard retirement age. That's kind of the goal there. We don't have it planned out exactly on how fast we can scale, but that's the goal is to be financially free prior to what normal retirement would have led us to. And then, as far as passing on generational wealth, I'm very thankful to my parents for what they did pass on as far as, what their parents had given them and the amount of baggage that they were carrying that they made sure not to pass on to us kids. I'm very thankful for that, and they definitely moved the ball down the field as far as if think about if you're trying to get to the goal, they definitely move the ball, and we're just trying to do that same thing for where we're at and move it a little bit closer to the goal. And um I don't know that we will have anything like I said, huge or lavish, but my main priority was to at least have a house that I could pass along to my son. That and whether or not he wants to keep it as an asset, um, or if he wants to make it his primary residence. But that was him having this entry into the housing market, because that's one thing that we are just not sure is going to be available to the younger generation is breaking into the housing market to have a primary residence when it's time to want to start a family or get married or just pursue a career, and having that amount of stability to kind of be his launch pad. That's the main goal, and if we can make sure that we do that where it's not a huge tax burden to him, or um, a house that has tons of issues or something that becomes more of a hindrance, then that way he doesn't have to participate in this whole renter nation type of lifestyle. Because I really think home ownership just really gives you a sense of independence and true freedom that renting doesn't. And I know that people will think that renting is freedom, but because you're not tied down anywhere, but there's just something about knowing that someone else can't say suddenly like, oh, this can't be your home anymore, like you're going to have to find somewhere else to live. And so yeah, that's kind of the end goal, is just making sure he has that stability to start off his path.
I love that. What you're talking about, passing the ball down the field and getting closer to the goal. I see that also as kind of what my vision is. And like you're saying, maybe you don't reach this certain goal that you have for yourself, but you just want to pass the ball along and get it closer to that goal for your son and whatnot. So I love that. So thanks for coming on again. We'll do it again next week. And next week, like I said, it's going to be kind of a comparing Tennessee to Hawaii and maybe cost of things and cost of living, and see how much you can save by maybe not paying for the price of paradise, I guess.
Yeah. Hey, it's nice here. It's just not
Oh
paradise.
yeah, okay. Well, I mean, all those trees you show falling down
Oh
and
yeah.
everything. So yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, Sierra. We'll do it again.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.